Did you, as a clerk, and I have always tell law students, get a clerkship. This is very important. But as a clerk, what is it that you start to learn about the profession that they didn't teach you in law school? Like, what are some of the day-to-day realities that you're like, oh, I wish they taught this in law school? What sort of
Well, I just want to go back on something
Sure.
you said. You said you always tell people to get a clerkship. I don't agree with that.
Okay.
Because I think there are different clerkships. There are some judges who have been at it so long, they know it all, they have no interest in mentoring somebody, and I think it's just a dull year and you could do other things for that year. But if you're really with a judge who knows what he or she is doing
Right.
and really cares about it and knows how to form a relationship
Right.
of mentoring and working with the clerk, then it's really a valuable kind of thing.
It's a valid point because I never had a clerkship.
Yeah.
No one really told me to do that. But what is it that you learned from, let's say you do have that hypothetical great mentor
Yeah.
type judge. What is it that you learn from a judge and a clerk? Like what goes on?
Well, I'm watching trials every day.
Okay.
Some judges don't want their clerks in a courtroom, but this was a great experience. And he was just a very hard taskmaster because he had great expectations because, as good a lawyer as he was,
Right.
he was not tolerant of people who were less than him. And he was very demanding and very exacting in terms of my research and making sure it was right and accurate and shepherdizing cases, which means following up and getting them current. And I enjoyed watching the trials when they were in progress and then having him come back to the chambers and telling me more or less what they did that he thought was good, which was very few things,
Right.
and telling me what they did that was bad, that was really helpful, really helpful to me. And in those days, it wasn't where a judge was on civil or criminal or matrimonial. They would throw to a judge, there were not these departments, whatever was next. You could see civil cases, criminal cases, and we had the Reuben Hurricane Carter case, which
That's
was
fascinating
a
case.
great case, great exciting experience for me. But I was watching these lawyers try cases, and after a while I said to myself, I can do this. I mean, I can do this, I really, really can. And I just enjoyed talking with the judge on motion days and things like this. And I realize now,
Right.
he was only 58 years old when he became a judge, and he seemed so old to me. I guess I was 24, 25. And he was such a powerful guy in all respects, and it was just a great experience working for somebody who's demanding or exacting. And I think that's a much better experience than working for somebody who says everything's acceptable. I think
Right. Yeah.
I think you need somebody who's a good taskmaster.
I agree. Is there any particular style of a trial lawyer, for example? Watching different trial lawyers, I always find out, like, what is your personality, the authentic self? Usually they become good trial lawyers, people that are just, or they know the facts, they know the law, but there's a plus dimension to them. What makes someone a good trial lawyer? What styles do you like that particularly you adapted to?
Well, one thing I learned relatively early is you can't affect a persona that's not you. You have to be you.
Hallelujah.
And I would take all the courses by different style lawyers,
Right.
the colorful
over the top.
one, very florid, and it works for them.
Right.
And then you hear some of these good old boys down south lecturing, and maybe that plays down south, but I don't know whether it plays up here in the urban areas of New Jersey. So there are certain things you can learn that
Right.
you can use in your own way, but you can't say, I'm going to imitate F. Lee Bailey. I'm going to imitate, Jerry Spence
Right.
from Montana. And it takes a while
Right.
to mold yourself.
That's right.
You have to see who you are.
That's right.
And so you have to engage in some artificial mannerisms at first until you're really comfortable doing it.
Right.
And then you'll gel into who you are. I learned, it took me about 7 or 8 years to learn that you don't want oratory.
Right.
At first I used to imagine that every word I was taking down, was speaking, was being taken down.
Right.
And it was. and I wanted to read it back and have it sound like Winston Churchill or somebody like that.
Right.
But then you realize the jury wants authenticity.
Yes.
They want you, and they want you to be you. And, you've heard the expression, you can't fake sincerity, or you have to work to fake sincerity. But you really can't be somebody who you're not.
No. So you have to find your own voice.
You have to find your own voice, and it takes a while to get comfortable, because first, when you're first trying cases, you're nervous about trying cases and things like that. Only when you're comfortable in a courtroom can you begin to experiment and be yourself and talk to a jury the way you want to. But it's good to read all these books about trial manuals, about good techniques to use, but you have to do it in your own voice and with your own persona.
You kind of bring your own background to whoever that voice is, or your personal experiences. Obviously, there's something about you that makes your voice. You can't disconnect your own life and your own experiences from that voice, or do you think you can? Some people can detach. But you think as a good trial lawyer, should you bring in some of your own, I'm not going to say baggage, but some of your own background? Could it help you in a trial or something like that?
Yeah, I think so. I think the jury wants to see that you're authentic, that you're not, necessarily eloquent, that you can, be who you are. And I try as close as I can. People say, who do you want on your jury? And, of course, the nature of the case you're prosecuting, the nature of the client you represent affects that. But to the maximum extent possible, you can't always guarantee it because there's challenges on both sides. I would like people on the jury who I feel I can identify with, I can go out and have lunch with or something like that,
And then my understanding is you worked as a public defender at one point.
I did that for 2 years.
Tell me about that experience. What was that like?
That was really, really exciting. I clerked for the judge for a year, and then I did my 6 months active duty in the Army Reserves. Okay. And then I came back, and I wanted to get trial experience as quickly as possible. So I worked for a defense firm at the time that was defending automobile litigation. And, of course, when you first start, they give you cases in the special civil part, which were of little consequence, $5,000 upper limit. And then the public defender's office was just starting as a result of Gideon v. Wainwright, which was decided in 1963. But between 63 and 67, when a public defender's office opened, they still would recruit lawyers to defend people. Now, Gideon established a right to trial representation by everyone facing a felony charge or potential jail term. So they institutionalized it. They started the Office of the Public Defender, and I was there on the day it opened. And the people, there was the appellate section, different counties, and we were all young. I'd like to say the best and the brightest, but they're really exciting. Some people I went to law school, some other people. And I couldn't believe I had this responsibility. I was 26 years old, representing people. And nobody in my family was a lawyer. No, and I was like a professional, and it was so exciting. And I couldn't believe that this was not a game, that I was doing it for real. I tried 4 murder cases, got acquittals in every one, which was absolutely, unbelievable. And I did some appellate work for the PD. I did some trial work for the PD. I argued before the appellate division regularly, argued before the Supreme Court a number of times. And it was just so exciting. And we were all, not all of us, most of us were single at the time. And I just couldn't believe I was doing this stuff. And it was just so daunting. And after a while, after about 2 years, it gets to be a little repetitive. Right. But what was good in the public defender's office when it first started, it was not a full-time job. It's what they called a prime-time job. So the public defender's office allowed you to work pretty undefined as a prime-time job, definition 60% of your time. So if you wanted to build a practice, you could. The only prohibition was you could not handle a criminal or a quasi-criminal case. You couldn't go to municipal court. Right. You couldn't go to So some people were opening their offices. Some people were already experienced when they went to work for the PD's office, and it augmented their salary, and it was great.